So Soundboks first created a name for themselves by creating a super durable Bluetooth speaker that can take any abuse that you can throw at it, all while still being able to get super loud and having a super long battery life as well. Now, even though the Soundboks 3 is relatively small and lightweight when compared to its direct competitors, we now have the Soundboks Go, which is just way more portable. However, if you are trying to choose between either of these two speakers, then you definitely do want to watch this video because these two speakers are very, very different from one another. Now regarding pricing, the Soundboks Go has a retail price of $700, and if you want the optional carrying strap, that's going to be an additional $50. Whereas the Soundboks 3 has a retail price of $1,000. Now overall, these speakers are very different from one another, and depending on your needs, you will be better off with one over the other. Nonetheless, if you want to pick either of these two speakers up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch shelf down below. I've made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And if you've been watching me for a while, you know I can be very particular. So I'll only set my name on something that I'm really proud of. Now first, let's talk about the design and portability of these speakers. Now, one of the main selling points about Soundboxes in general is that their speakers are super durable. Both the Soundboks 3 and the Go have an IP65 rating, meaning that they're both dust and water resistant. So getting caught in the rain, getting splashed on, or getting sand caught in either of these two speakers isn't going to be an issue. However, even though these speakers are super durable, I would still be mindful about not getting any dirt or water caught in the exhaust ports on either of these speakers. The Go has them all around its main woofer, and the Soundboks 3 has them on its sides. Now, even though the Soundboks 3 is relatively compact when compared to its direct competitors, and it's relatively lightweight, weighing in at 34 pounds, so traveling with this speaker isn't too bad. Portability with the Go is just way better. The Go weighs in at 20 pounds, it's significantly smaller than the Soundboks 3, and I would actually argue that it's more durable than the Soundboks 3, because the Go has a mostly super dense plastic body and honeycomb grille, and we've got those extruded rubber bumpers all around the body of the Go, which does a much better job of absorbing impacts than the silicone balls found on the corners of the Soundboks 3. So yes, if you plan on constantly traveling with your speaker, then the Go is the obvious choice because of its more durable body and is just smaller and lighter. And as a plus, the Go has a built-in loop strap, so you can always attach some things to it, which is nice. But both of these speakers do have speaker stand mounts on the bottom, which is also very nice. But now let's talk about battery life. Now, both of these speakers have an advertised battery life of 40 hours, and that's with both of them playing at 50% volume and while in their power EQ. And for context, having either of these two speakers playing at 50% volume, that's like having either the JBL Boombox 2 or UE Hyperboom playing around 85% volume, which is pretty loud. However, at max volume, the Soundboks Go is good for up to 10 hours of playback time, which is a lot, whereas with the Soundboks 3 is good for up to 5 hours of playback time, which is still very decent. However, if you were to use the Go while in its bass plus EQ, which is my preferred EQ here because you're going to get the most out of the speaker, it's going to get a little louder and you're going to get a little bit more bass. However, you are going to have to make some sacrifices when it comes to battery life because at max volume, it's only good for up to 6 hours of playback time, which is still very good. Now, the Soundboks 3 also has a bass plus EQ, but personally, I think the Soundboks 3 sounds perfect with its power EQ. However, if you do want to use the bass plus EQ on the Soundboks 3, where obviously you're going to have more bass, but you are going to have to make some sacrifices when it comes to battery life because it's only going to be good for up to 3 hours of playback time. Or if you want to extend the battery life on the Soundboks 3, you can always use it while in its indoors EQ. Now, while in its indoors EQ, the Soundboks 3 isn't going to have as much bass, but it's still going to have a decent amount of bass, and at max volume is going to be good for up to 7 hours of playback time. And if you were to use the indoors EQ on the Soundboks Go, it's going to be good for up to 14 hours of playback time, which is a lot. However, the Soundboks Go is going to sound very bright and flat, and it's just not going to get as loud. But obviously, the Soundboks Go is going to have a longer lasting battery than the Soundboks 3 because it has one less woofer to power. However, the Soundboks Go does have significantly less bass than the Soundboks 3, and we'll address this in a minute. But whether you decide to go with the Go or the 3, both of these speakers have the same 99.84 watt-hour battery, and they're easily removable. And this is good for two main reasons. Now, the first reason is that this is going to extend the life of your investment. Because if your battery were to die on you, like mine did on my Soundboks 3, after 3 years, I can always just get a new battery. Or if you plan on being off-grid for a while, and if you have multiple batteries, then you can always swap them out and keep the party going. However, there are some few important things to keep in mind here when it comes to using the batteries on these speakers. Now, you can use these speakers while you have them plugged in and have your battery charging. But Soundboks is very adamant that you don't use these speakers past 50% volume while they're plugged in. But also, Soundboks is very adamant that you don't use these speakers while they're plugged in without a battery, because I tried doing this with my Soundboks Go and it literally started screeching. But now we have to talk about the ports on these speakers because they're very different. Now, the Soundboks Go only has an audio jack. Now, it's great and all that you can use a wired connection with this speaker, but that's it. And in general, the port setup on the Soundboks Go is very disappointing because there's a lot of horsepower here that's just going unused. Whereas with the Soundboks 3, it has an audio in and audio out jack, so you can always daisy chain the speaker to another speaker and have them play in sync. But the Soundboks 3 also has two XLR/1/4-inch inputs, so you can either plug in a pair of microphones or a guitar into the speaker, or you can always use the speaker with a mixer if you like to DJ. Overall, the port setup on the Soundboks 3 just makes it way more versatile, and personally, I feel that if the Soundboks Go had one XLR/1/4-inch input and an audio out jack, I think I would be very happy. Now, when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, both of these speakers are using Bluetooth 5.0, but both of these speakers can only be connected to one device at a time, and they're both only using SBC. However, latency is not an issue with either of these two speakers. So if you are planning on watching a video with these speakers, then your audio and visual are going to be in sync. But before we move on to sound and speaker setup, I do want to point out one pet peeve that I have about both of these speakers, and that has to do with their dial. Now, you can control the local volume of these speakers with this dial, but you can't actually control your music media playback. You gotta do all of that either from your phone or whatever media source you're using. But now let's talk about sound. Regarding speaker setups, the Go has a single frontward firing woofer and single frontward firing tweeter. But the really important thing here is that the Go has frontward firing exhaust ports that are found around the woofer, which means that you can't place the speaker up against a wall and amplify its bass like you can with a lot of other box speakers out there. Whereas with the Soundboks 3, it has two frontward firing woofers and a single frontward firing tweeter. But there are some major differences to keep in mind here. First off, you can amplify the bass on the Soundboks 3 by placing it in a corner because its exhaust ports shoot out the sides. But also, with the Soundboks 3, its top woofer handles the mids and mid-lows, and its bottom woofer handles the lows. Now, even though the Soundboks 3 still leans towards a brighter sound signature, since it has a woofer that focuses on the lows, the Soundboks 3 still has a good amount of physicality in its bass at lower volumes, making it usable while both indoors and outdoors. Whereas with the Go, this is a very hard speaker to use while indoors. The Soundboks Go really likes to put its tweeter to work because it handles the highs and a good amount of the mids as well. So at the lower volumes that you'll want to use the speaker at while you use it indoors, it can sound very bright and flat. Now, you can go in and make your own EQ, and I went in and I raised the bass on the speaker and I also lowered the highs. But even still, at lower volumes, the bass on the speaker can be underwhelming and it can still sound narrow. So for this reason, I would only recommend that you get the Soundboks Go if you plan on mostly using it while outdoors. And when I say mostly outdoors, I mean like 90% of the time. Whereas the Soundboks 3, you can thoroughly enjoy your music whether you're indoors using your speaker at lower volumes or while you're outdoors and have the volume cranked up. But with all that being said, we're going to jump into the sound test. Both of these speakers are playing while in their power EQ, but the Go is playing at 75% volume, whereas the Soundboks 3 is playing at 63% volume.
Had a feeling we had something. Could have seen it in your eyes. Took a second, but I'm right here, waiting for you with open arms. How about you coming closer? We can do my place. Maybe we can try beating up by 7. You possession over, so it's guaranteed. I'll be forever thinking more about you and me. I don't wanna let you go. I don't wanna let you go. Nah. Tell me what you want to know. Run your fingers down me slow, 'cause you're in my head. You are, 'cause you're in my head. 'Cause you're in my what you think? What you think? 'Cause you're in my what you think? What you think? 'Cause you're in my love that I've been craving. Let me in now, don't be shy. We can be here, share a story. With dreams and reality collide. Are we back to the start? I can play the game, but I'm falling again. No, don't hold back, take it far. Promise you the same, let the pleasure begin. How about you coming closer? We can do my place. Maybe we can try beating up by 7. You're the second over, so it's guaranteed. I'll be forever thinking more about you and me. I don't wanna let you go. I don't wanna let you go. Nah. Tell me what you want to know. Run your fingers down me slow, 'cause you're in my head. You are, 'cause you're in my head. 'Cause you're in my. I don't wanna let you go. I don't wanna let you go. Tell me what you want to know. Run your fingers down me slow, 'cause you're in my head.
So, like I said, both Soundboks speakers do lean towards a brighter sound signature. However, the Soundboks Go has a brighter sound signature than the 3 because its tweeter is putting in overtime and it has less physicality in its bass. Whereas with the Soundboks 3, since it has that woofer that is mostly focusing on the lows, it has way more physicality in its bass, but it also sounds more balanced and more open as well. So overall, if you want the better sounding speaker here, then the Soundboks 3 is the obvious choice here. And besides simply sounding more balanced than the Go, you can also use the Soundboks 3 at lower volumes and still thoroughly enjoy your music while indoors, which is something you can't do with the Go, in my opinion. And when it comes to max volume performance, the Soundboks 3 also manages to get louder than the Go. Now both the Go and 3 manage to get dangerously loud and they'll both result in a visit from the cops. But the Soundboks 3 does manage to get noticeably louder than the Go. Now the Soundboks Go also gets super loud and it gets louder than, let's say, the Partybox 310 or Sony XP700. But that's mostly because of its brighter sound signature. Even though the Go gets louder than both the Partybox 310 and Sony XP700, it doesn't have as much physicality in its bass. But finally, let's talk about pairing these speakers up to one another. Now you can pair a Soundboks Go to a Soundboks 3 and you can have up to 5 different speakers paired together, which I feel is plenty. Now, overall, Soundboks' speaker pairing protocol is very good. It's very easy to use. You can do everything from the app. You can choose from different EQ settings, and you can assign different channels to each speaker. You don't need to have two of the same speakers to get left and right stereo sound going, like you do with a lot of other brands out there. But like I mentioned earlier, the Soundboks 3 does have that audio out jack, which is something the Soundboks Go just doesn't have. So with the Soundboks 3, you can always daisy chain any other speaker to it and have them play in sync. So overall, the Soundboks 3 is a little more versatile, and it plays nice with other speakers that aren't from Soundboks. But with all that being said, if you're looking for a super durable and super loud Bluetooth speaker that's going to have no problem keeping up with you, then either of these two soundboxes are good options. However, if you want the more durable and more portable option, then the Soundboks Go is the way to go. Now, even though yes, the Soundboks 3 is fairly portable and easy enough to carry around, it's nowhere near as convenient as the Go. But keep in mind, if you decide to pick up the Go, this is a speaker that's better suited to be used while outdoors and at higher volumes, because at lower volumes, its bass can be rather lacking. But if you're looking for the soundbox here that you can use while both indoors at lower volumes or while outdoors at higher volumes, then the Soundboks 3 is the better option. Simply put, the Soundboks 3 just sounds much better than the Soundboks Go, thanks to its extra woofer and less reliance on its tweeter. But also, the Soundboks 3 is way more versatile than the Go thanks to its port setup. You can plug it into a microphone, a guitar, or plug it into a mixer if you want. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.